1942. The skies over Europe were engulfed in smoke and fire. On the ground, the Nazi army still rampaged across the continent, from the Atlantic coast to the outskirts of Stalingrad. Above, another war was beginning. The battle for control of the skies, where America's massive flying fortresses faced the steel storms of the Luftwaffe. It was an era when death came from every direction, from the clouds, from anti-aircraft fire, from fighters diving like bolts of lightning. In this context, the U.S. Army Air Forces launched their first strategic bombing campaign targeting the industrial heart of the Third Reich. They called it precision bombing, striking factories, ports, and submarine bases. But in the cold winds and smoke of Europe, precision was merely an illusion. The American boys sent to England that year were very young. They came from all corners of the country, Texas, Ohio, California, Massachusetts, lands thousands of miles from the war. They had never seen Europe, never faced death, yet now they confronted it daily. From scattered airfields in eastern England, squadrons of B-17 flying fortresses took off in the misty dawn, heading toward the German coast. Every mission was a gamble with the Reaper. The survival rate after 25 missions was barely 1 in 3. That number made it clear. Surviving required more than skill. It demanded luck, faith, and unbreakable camaraderie. Among the first units to arrive in England was the 91st Bombardment Group, Heavy, stationed at RAF Bassingbourn, north of London. There, in late September 1942, a new crew was formed under the command of Captain Robert Knight Morgan, 24, a son of Asheville, North Carolina. Morgan had been a civilian pilot who loved the sky since childhood and was now in charge of one of the largest war machines ever built, the Boeing B-17F Flying Fortress. Serial number 41-24485, the plane had no name when it left the factory in Seattle. It was one of thousands of flying fortresses hastily assembled and sent to Europe. But once the 10-man crew was complete, Morgan decided to give it a personal name, one carrying both love and longing for home. Memphis Belle. The name came from a hometown girl, Margaret Polk, a young woman in Memphis, Tennessee. On a quiet night when they said goodbye before Morgan's first mission, she promised to wait for him. He carried that promise into the skies, engraving her name on the aircraft like a talisman amid the storm of steel. On the nose of the plane, they painted a blonde pin-up girl leaning against the words Memphis Belle. The image would later become iconic, a symbol of youth, of America, of soldiers leaving with smiles, uncertain if they would return. 10 men in that plane would go on to create one of the most extraordinary stories of World War II. Captain Morgan's crew was made up of ordinary but brave men. James Varinas, co-pilot and Morgan's closest friend. Charles Layton, flight engineer and top turret gunner. Vincent Evans, navigator. Harry Anderson, bombardier. Bob Hansen and Bill Winchell, waist gunners. Cecil Scott, ball turret gunner. John Quinlan, tail gunner. And Casimir Nastel, radio operator. They were not heroes from a storybook, just men with simple dreams to survive another day. But that made them extraordinary. On their first day at Bassingbourn, they were greeted by whistling winds on the runway and the smell of burning oil. Other flying fortresses were returning from missions, many reduced to blackened frames. Some belly-landed, smoke pouring out. From these wrecks, injured pilots were pulled out, blood mingling with mud. It was Morgan's first glimpse of the reality of war. He understood that the road ahead left no room for mistakes. The B-17F they flew was a mechanical marvel of its era. Over 22 meters long, with a wingspan of 31 meters, armed with 13 Browning machine guns, and carrying nearly 2 tons of bombs. It could climb to 10,000 meters, but at that altitude the cold could freeze fingers, and anti-aircraft shells could tear the plane apart like paper. Despite being called a flying fortress, every mission was a step into hell. Training was urgent. Morgan drilled his crew like a family. He believed that in war, trust between men was more important than steel or gunpowder. They practiced hundreds of times, bombing, firefighting, emergency landings, reloading guns in the dark. Each man had to know the other's roles by heart, because if one was wounded, the rest had to step in immediately. During rare moments of rest, they played cards, smoked, and shared stories of home. Some longed for the taste of their mother's apple pie, others for the fields of Nebraska, or nights in Tennessee bars. Everything else was distant, leaving only England's gray skies and the roar of Wright cyclone engines each morning. At night, they lay in crude barracks, listening to distant bombs over London. Sometimes Morgan would take out a photo of Margaret, gaze at her smile, and carefully fold it back. She was the reason to return, and the reason to fly again tomorrow. In November 1942, Memphis Belle flew its first combat mission. From then on, its name was tied to every sortie, across the icy North Sea, through Germany's mist, toward cities under siege. No one knew it would become legendary, only that every takeoff was accompanied by silent prayers. But before that, in the winter of 1942, with snow covering Bassingbourn's runways, no one thought of fame or victory. They thought only of the mission and each other. In the darkness, Memphis Belle rested on the runway, its fuselage dimly shining under the lights. An aircraft like any other, yet carrying hearts ready to soar through hell. No one could know that just months later the name Memphis Belle would become a symbol of courage for thousands of American pilots. It would be the first B-17 to complete 25 missions and survive to tell its story. But on that first night, as cold winds howled through the propellers and frost covered the gauges, everything was just beginning. And a legend, the legend of men flying for freedom, was quietly born in the skies of England. Winter 1942 was colder over Europe than any winter before. In eastern England, frost-covered fields stretched across the countryside, and at Bassingbourn Air Base, B-17s lined up, waiting for takeoff orders. The roar of 4 Wright Cyclone engines shook the air, the sound of steel and fuel mingling with the wind, composing the overture to a day that many of them would never return from. Each morning, pilots were roused by a short whistle. Silently, they rose from their beds, donned heavy flight suits, oxygen masks, and cold weather gear, and walked through the dark to the briefing room. On a large map, the operations officer traced the flight path with a wooden pointer, a red line stretching across the English Channel, over French skies toward Brest, Saint-Nazaire, or Rouen. When the word Germany appeared, the room fell silent. They knew it meant flak bursting overhead, iron storms raining from the Luftwaffe. And although they smiled, some exchanged glances without speaking. Perhaps it was the last time they would sit together in that room. Memphis Belle's first mission took place on November 7, 1942, targeting Brest, a key German U-boat base on the Atlantic coast. Low clouds, strong winds, and dense anti-aircraft fire awaited. As they crossed the French coast, black clouds exploded around the plane. 88mm shells burst so close that black smoke blurred the cockpit windows. Shrapnel ripped through the wings, tail, and fuselage, yet Memphis Belle held formation. At 10,000 meters, thin air froze oxygen masks, making every breath a struggle. On the ground, guns continued to pour fire skyward. When bombs were released, the entire plane shook as if it might shatter. Then they turned back, flying through a hail of bullets again. Upon landing at Bassingbourn, one engine was dead, the tail riddled with holes, but all 10 men survived. For the first time, they knew what it meant to survive hell. Subsequent missions were no easier. In December, they attacked Saint-Nazaire, dubbed the Hornet's Nest of Nazi Germany for its dense flak and constant Messerschmitt patrols. Memphis Belle was riddled with nearly 200 holes. The bomb bay doors jammed, forcing Morgan to flip the plane to release the stuck explosives, risking detonation mid-air. Yet they returned safely. Every landing, mechanics rushed over, counting bullet holes as if tallying fate. The airmen nicknamed the plane the 9 Lives Cat, for no one could understand how it kept flying after sustaining so much damage. By early 1943, missions stretched deeper into Germany. They hit shipyards, steel mills, airfields, and railways. For the first time, they saw the skies over Hamburg and Bremen, vast cities shrouded in industrial smoke and flak bursts. Crossing the Rhine, 88mm guns opened fire relentlessly. Black smoke swirled like a storm. Amid the inferno, B-17s were struck, breaking apart, plummeting like fiery stars. Morgan never forgot the sight of one fortress torn in half, spinning slowly before their eyes. Through the smoke, some survived the bailout. Others disappeared in the blaze. Every mission meant loss. In his journal, Morgan wrote, "I learned not to look to my right. That's where friends often vanished." By mid-February 1943, Memphis Belle had completed 10 missions. The young crew's faces were etched with fatigue. Sleep was shallow, jolted by distant engine noises at night. Over meals, they shared stories of crews that didn't return. Pilot Hansen of another group. The Hell's Angels shot down over Kiel, or innocent blonde vanished without a trace over the North Sea. The more they flew, the clearer the truth became. Survival after 25 missions was 1 in 3, yet it also forged unbreakable bonds. During flights, amid the roar of engines, they communicated without words. Bombardier Anderson timed the drops. Co-pilot Varenas checked pressure. And Chief Engineer Layton reminded, "Never give up while the plane still breathes." One day in March 1943, on a mission to Wilhelmshaven, they faced a true nightmare. Separated from the formation by thick clouds, Memphis Belle became a lone target. 3 Messerschmitt Bf-109s dug from the sun, bullets piercing the fuselage. One shattered the cockpit glass, slicing Morgan's hand, while tail gunner Quinlan lost contact for minutes. Smoke rose from engine number 3, and the crew feared they would have to bail out. But Layton cut the fuel, sealed the valves, and extinguished the fire with a handheld extinguisher. They maintained altitude, limping back to England with 3 engines barely working. Upon landing, a landing wheel broke. The plane tilted, but no one died. It was said that fate had chosen Memphis Belle to survive, and thereafter, whenever it took off, the entire base watched. In the following months, missions grew increasingly brutal. The 8th Air Force pushed deeper into Germany, yet escort fighters could not reach far enough. P-47s or Spitfires could accompany them only to the border, leaving the flying fortresses alone in hostile skies. When enemy fighters struck, the sky became a maze of fire and smoke. Memphis Belle's gunners fought non-stop, barrels glowing red-hot. Once, Scott, the ball turret gunner, downed 2 Bf-109s in under a minute, then passed out from oxygen deprivation. Meanwhile, Morgan kept the plane steady, murmuring, "We'll make it home, Belle. We'll make it." After every mission, as the plane rolled to its spot, mechanics awaited, patting the fuselage as if welcoming an old friend back from the dead. Memphis Belle was riddled with holes, aluminum torn and patched with new metal. Each patch was a memory, a reminder that survival comes at a steep price. Yet the crew pressed on. They never spoke of fear. They counted down the remaining missions. 12 left, 9 left, then 25. That number became the goal of their lives. By late April 1943, Memphis Belle had completed 24 missions. They had struck Bremen, Kiel, Lorient, Vegesack, names that sent shivers through others. Each return meant losing friends from other crews. Morgan wrote, "We no longer cry. We only clean the cockpit and prepare for tomorrow." In mid-May, they were ordered on their 25th mission, Lorient, Western France. For them, it was the line between life and legend. That morning, before sunrise, Morgan looked at the crew. All were smiling. No one spoke, but they knew. Returning meant discharge, home. They climbed aboard, checked weapons, donned oxygen masks. Engines roared, the sound echoing across the base like the heartbeat of a giant. Memphis Belle taxied and lifted off for the 25th and final mission, a flight through white clouds and flak, ending the journey of those who dared to fly into death to find a way home. They did not yet know that hours later, their names would be recorded in history. But at that moment, as wheels left the ground, only one thought remained: survive today. And in the cold French skies, among gray clouds, Memphis Belle flew on, an iron bird carrying 10 lives, 10 promises, and the belief that even in hell, a path home exists. Spring 1943. After more than half a year of combat, the skies over Germany had become a vast graveyard for B-17s. The massive formations that once departed from England now flew more sparsely, as too many planes never returned. Yet amidst those cold statistics, Memphis Belle endured, battered, scratched, riddled with bullets, but still flying. By May 1943, Captain Robert Morgan and his crew had just one mission left to reach the symbolic milestone of 25 combat missions, the number representing safe return and a journey back home. When news of this spread, it was like a warm breeze through the brutal winter of war. Military officials, the press, and even Hollywood immediately took notice. Amid the heavy losses, America needed a story of hope, a symbol proving that courage and spirit could triumph over fate. The Army Air Forces decided Memphis Belle would become the face representing all those fighting in Europe's skies. A young Hollywood director, William Wyler, then serving as a lieutenant in the Air Force, was given a special assignment: fly with Memphis Belle and capture the most authentic footage of the war. Wyler was already famous in Hollywood for films like Mrs. Miniver, an Oscar-winning depiction of wartime Britain. But this time he would not direct from a studio. He brought real cameras, real film onto a real plane, facing real bullets. With a small film crew, Wyler followed Morgan and the crew on their final missions. Cameras were mounted in the fuselage and cockpit of the B-17, with precious Kodachrome film preserved under harsh conditions. Every frame represented the crew's very lives. Wyler later recalled he had never been so afraid. The whistle of flak through the windows, shattered glass, black smoke rising from burning B-17s in the air. Yet in that moment, he understood the significance of his work, capturing the true portrait of heroes made of flesh and blood. On May 17, 1943, Memphis Belle flew its 25th mission, striking the port of Lorient in Germany. Over the French skies, the formation came under intense fire from anti-aircraft guns and Focke-Wulf fighters. Shells pierced the wings, oil leaked, guns malfunctioned. But the crew held formation, dropped their bombs on target, and returned. Upon landing at Bassingbourn, hundreds of comrades cheered. The propeller stopped, smoke still rising from the plane, and Captain Morgan stepped down, exhausted but smiling. Memphis Belle had achieved what few dared to believe. 25 missions, and not a single life lost. The following day, news spread across America. The press called them the Immortal Crew, the legendary Flying Fortress. The pin-up girl on the nose appeared everywhere. Newspapers, magazines, propaganda posters, even in aircraft factories. But that pride was not for one B-17 alone. It represented thousands of crews who never returned, for those who sacrificed in silence. For this reason, the Air Force decided to bring Memphis Belle to the U.S. to participate in a special propaganda campaign, a months-long war bond tour. In June 1943, Memphis Belle was refurbished and flew with the entire original crew. They departed England amid applause and tears. When wheels touched American soil, they were no longer anonymous soldiers. They were heroes. From New York to Los Angeles, Chicago to Dallas, they visited over 30 cities, standing on podiums before tens of thousands. Behind them was the B-17 adorned with the blonde pin-up, a symbol of courage and an unconquerable America. On city streets, people threw flowers, children ran alongside, women offered hugs, and factories paused for a few minutes to salute the returning sons. Yet amid the cheers, the crew knew what awaited those still in the fight. More missions, more formations facing hell. Morgan once said in a speech in Chicago, "We are not the heroes. The real heroes are still out there, in the skies over Germany." Meanwhile, in Hollywood, Wyler began editing his documentary. He wanted the film not just to report a victory, but to serve as a tribute. Thousands of feet of film were carefully cut and spliced, blending real combat footage with daily life of the crew. In 1944, the film premiered as The Memphis Belle, A Story of a Flying Fortress, one of the first color war documentaries, both harrowing and moving. For the first time, American audiences saw the reality of air combat, sweat, blood, and fear etched on the faces of 20-year-old boys. The film had no script, no actors, only truth. That authenticity made it a landmark of realistic war cinema. Hollywood, a place of dreams, now helped shape the fighting spirit of a nation. Wyler's film was shown across America, in theaters, factories, schools, even near the front lines. It taught audiences that war was not merely maps and slogans, but the lives of real people keeping freedom alive. With Memphis Belle, fame reached its peak. The plane became a symbol of the U.S. Army Air Forces, a symbol of courage and teamwork. Yet when applause faded and Hollywood lights dimmed, the crew returned to ordinary life. Ordinary soldiers carrying unforgettable memories. Some continued serving until the war's end. Others returned to civilian life, married, had children. Robert Morgan continued flying, but always carried in his heart the image of Memphis Belle and the comrades who had fallen. As for William Wyler, when asked why he risked filming such a dangerous project, he simply replied, "Because I wanted the American people to know what freedom is worth, and who paid for it." Thus, not only those with guns went to battle. Those with cameras, pens, even brushes, all fought in their own ways. And in 1943, as Memphis Belle and Hollywood soared together across the skies of propaganda and belief, America understood that true strength lay not only in steel and bombs, but in story. A story of courage, camaraderie, and unwavering faith. From that moment on, Memphis Belle was more than a plane. It became a legend written in images, sound, and human hearts, a testament to an era when even Hollywood donned a uniform and flew into battle with America. May 1943. Over the skies of Germany, the war raged hour by hour. The U.S. Army Air Force's formation still took off from the damp airfields of eastern England, heading into Europe's fiery skies. Every mission tested the boundaries of life and death, and every return was a miracle. Yet among the countless steel machines with cold serial numbers, only one name was steadily becoming legendary: Memphis Belle. After nearly 8 months of relentless combat, it had completed 24 missions, with just one final flight left to reach a historic milestone: 25 combat missions, and returning alive. In the days leading up to that last mission, the atmosphere at Bassingbourn Air Base was taut as a drawn bow. Everyone knew Memphis Belle was about to write a new chapter in U.S. Air Force history, but they also knew one stray bullet, one engine aflame, one wrong decision, and it would all end. Such was the cruel law of war. No victory was certain until wheels touched the ground. On May 17, 1943, at 7:30 a.m., the skies over eastern England were shrouded in mist and low clouds. Captain Robert Morgan's crew gathered in front of Memphis Belle. They spoke little, exchanging handshakes, a few awkward jokes, and glances that silently acknowledged this might be the last flight together. The B-17, now scarred and battered, was meticulously prepared. Machine guns loaded, engines checked, bombs firmly secured. Today's target, the port of Lorient in Germany, a fortified U-boat base, defended by layers of anti-aircraft fire. As the Wright Cyclone engines roared, the sound echoed across the base. A gust of wind carried the smell of gasoline and burning oil. Propellers sliced through the mist as the heavy flying fortress taxied down the runway. Morgan pulled the control, the fuselage shuddered, and the plane lifted from the ground. Below, England receded, giving way to the cold North Sea. At 20,000 feet, temperatures dropped to nearly -40 degrees Celsius. The thin air made every breath freeze against oxygen masks. They flew in tight formation, surrounded by hundreds of other B-17s, each carrying 10 men and 2 tons of bombs. Ahead, the sky seemed blue, but everyone knew it would soon turn into a storm of steel and fire. Crossing the English Channel, the French skies began to fill with smoke. German flak opened fire. Clouds erupted into dense black bursts, shells exploding dangerously close to the wings. The rattle of steel on the fuselage sounded like hail. "Keep formation!" Morgan shouted over the radio. Behind, tailgunner Quinlan saw a B-17 in the formation hit, its wing folded, plummeting like a black star. No parachutes deployed. Minutes from Lorient, Luftwaffe Focke-Wulf 190s attacked from the sun. The formation shook with gunfire. Every crew member of Memphis Belle was at their station. Hansen and Winchell fired from the waist guns, Leighton rotated the top turret, and Scott lay in the belly gun, eyes glued to the sights. Each second stretched into eternity. A bullet pierced a wing, causing an oil leak. Another tore through the fuselage near the radio compartment. Yet the plane held course. Bombardier Harry Anderson opened the nose compartment. Through the frosted glass, he saw the target, the submarine repair yard next to the port. As the ready signal sounded, the crew held their breath. Anderson squeezed the control at the exact moment. "Bombs away!" His voice echoed through the radio. 6 bombs dropped, plunging to the earth. Seconds later, columns of fire rose hundreds of feet. The target was hit. Mission accomplished, but the journey home was far from over. Flak continued to explode around them. Smoke thickened the sky. One engine began to shake unnaturally. Morgan had to reduce power to stabilize. Over the radio, he heard another pilot scream, "They're hit! The B-17 behind is on fire!" Then the signal was lost. No one spoke. Only the growl of engines and the whistle of wind through bullet holes remained. After 4 hours of tense flying, the English coastline appeared ahead. As Bassingbourn's runway emerged through the clouds, the cabin fell into a breathtaking silence. Morgan lowered the controls. Propellers slowed. Wheels touched down, the fuselage bounced, then rolled to a stop. At that moment, the crew erupted in cheers. Memphis Belle had returned. Mission 25 completed. No one killed. Opening the hatches, cold wind swept in with the shouts from the ground. Hundreds of soldiers and ground crew rushed forward, embracing the crew. The young men, covered in dust, smoke, and sweat, had become living legends. Memphis Belle, riddled with bullet holes, one wing torn, still stood firm, a symbol of endurance and indomitable courage. That evening, at the barracks, they celebrated with champagne, a rare luxury in wartime. Yet joy mingled with solemnity. Everyone remembered those who had not returned. From the window, they looked at the runway, where the charred remains of other B-17s still lay, planes that never completed their 25th mission. In the dim firelight, Memphis Belle shone like a luminous ghost in the night. 2 days later, Colonel Curtis LeMay, commanding the 1st Air Division, arrived at the base, shaking hands with each crew member. He said simply, "You have done what no one thought possible. And for that, America will never forget you." Shortly after, the Air Force decided Memphis Belle and her entire crew would be brought to the United States. They would no longer fly combat missions, and instead, they would carry their story across the nation, inspiring faith and proving that victory was real. On the day they left England, the sky was unusually clear. As Memphis Belle took off for the last time from Bassingbourn, the entire base lined the runway to bid farewell. Shouts of "Good luck, Belle!" echoed across the airfield. From the cockpit, Morgan looked back at the place that had been home, where they had survived hell. Then he pulled the control, sending the flying fortress westward, across the sea, heading for home. Weeks later, they landed in the United States. From that moment, Memphis Belle became more than a plane. It became a symbol of victory, of the human ability to overcome fear and death. Its story spread everywhere, in newspapers, on the radio, in the words of soldiers. It was called the Immortal Flying Fortress. But for Morgan and the crew, the most precious thing was not the title or medals. It was the silent moment when the plane touched down, when they realized they had survived. 10 men departed together. 10 men returned together. In war, sometimes that alone is the greatest victory. From then on, the name Memphis Belle was etched into history. It stood as a testament to the courage of thousands of other crews, those who flew but never landed. And in every mission they flew, the silent vow of those young men still echoed. We will return, even if only one survives, even if only a shadow remains. The war eventually came to an end. In 1945, the guns fell silent across Europe. Nazi Germany collapsed and white flags waved over the ruins of Berlin. From the United States, millions poured into the streets, celebrating victory, embracing one another amid cheers and tears. Yet amidst this joy, one silent symbol remained alive: the Memphis Belle, the flying fortress that had completed 25 deadly missions, becoming an enduring emblem of courage that never faded. After the 1943 War Bond Tour, Memphis Belle was retired. It was stored at Wright Field, Ohio, alongside hundreds of other aircraft awaiting dismantling. But no one wanted to destroy it. To many, Belle was no longer just a B-17. It was the spirit of a generation. When the war ended, tens of thousands of flying fortresses were cut into scrap. Yet voices rose, "Do not let Memphis Belle suffer that fate." It is history. In 1946, the city of Memphis, which had inspired the legendary name, officially requested the aircraft's return. The military agreed, and Memphis Belle was brought home. When the B-17 touched down at Memphis Airport, thousands came to greet it. They laid flowers on its wings, took photographs, and told their children, "This is the plane that carried the name of our city through war and back." In its early years, it was displayed in the city park, beneath the clear Tennessee skies, a living monument at the heart of the community. But time is the enemy of all legacies. In the following decades, as America moved into the Cold War and the Vietnam era, Memphis Belle gradually faded from memory. Sun, rain, wind, and curious hands left the aircraft in serious disrepair. Paint peeled, cockpit glass shattered, the bomb bay rusted. At times, people feared it might vanish. Like so many other memories of that blood-soaked era. By the late 1970s, however, a group of veterans and Memphis residents resolved to save Belle. They founded the Memphis Belle Memorial Association, raising funds and volunteering countless hours to protect the plane from decay. For them, this was not merely preserving an artifact. It was safeguarding the collective memory of a generation that sacrificed for freedom. For over 2 decades, they cared for, repainted, and shielded it, even with limited resources and work that seemed never-ending. In 1989, Hollywood revived the name once more. The film Memphis Belle, directed by Michael Caton Jones and produced by David Putnam, premiered with young actors including Matthew Modine, Eric Stoltz, Tate Donovan, and Sean Astin. While the script included fictional elements, the movie faithfully captured the spirit of wartime crews: camaraderie, fear, faith, and courage in the face of death. A new generation, born after the war, discovered Memphis Belle for the first time. The symbol was reborn, not just as a war machine, but as a legend of humans who refused to surrender to fate. Public interest after the film reinvigorated the preservation effort. In 2005, the U.S. Air Force took Memphis Belle from the city of Memphis to the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, where experts began a full restoration of the legendary plane. The project lasted more than 10 years, involving hundreds of engineers, historians, and volunteers. Every piece of metal was removed, cleaned, replaced, and repainted according to the 1943 design. New paint was applied by hand, and the pin-up artwork Memphis Belle was meticulously restored from original photos by artist George Petty. On May 17, 2018, the 75th anniversary of its 25th mission, Memphis Belle was officially unveiled for permanent display at the museum. Thousands of veterans, descendants of the crew, and history enthusiasts gathered under the Great Dome, where light shone upon the fully restored fuselage. As ceremonial music played, many could not hold back tears. In that moment, Memphis Belle was more than metal. It was a living symbol of courage and the collective memory of a generation that saved the world from tyranny. On the fuselage, 25 small yellow bombs still mark the completed missions. Below, the pin-up girl's gentle smile continues to watch over the young men who once flew her. On the information plaque before the cockpit, the inscription reads, "Dedicated to the men who flew and fought for freedom." Today, millions of Americans visit the Dayton Museum each year. Children place their hands on the cold fuselage, listening to parents recount the stories of 20-year-old men who once sat inside. They learn not only history but also that freedom always comes at a price paid in blood and bravery by men like Robert Morgan and his crew. Robert K. Morgan, commander of Memphis Belle, passed away in 2004 at age 85. In his later years, he frequently gave talks, recounting the story of his steel friend that survived alongside him. He said, "Whenever I close my eyes, I still hear that engine, the sound of freedom. And I still see Memphis Belle flying at dawn, heading home. These words serve as a farewell to a bygone era." Yet Memphis Belle remains, bathed in the museum's golden light, a reminder that memory never dies. Every bullet hole, every paint stroke, every rusted seat tells a story of courage, fear, and humanity amid the storm of history. From the European battlefield in 1943 to the museum display in 2018 spans 75 years, a long passage of time, yet just a moment in the immortal journey of a symbol. Memphis Belle is not just a story of a plane. It is a story of people, of spirit surpassing limits, of loyalty, and of the yearning to return home. And as the final light of day streams through the museum window, reflecting on the plane's blue fuselage, one can imagine the 10 young men of the past still seated in the cockpit, ready to take off. The engines hum in imagination, the propellers spin, and Memphis Belle flies again, no longer in war, but in humanity's eternal memory.